Good afternoon, and welcome to today's webinar, Let Global Flavors Transport Your Breakfast. My name is Peyton Ray, and I will be your host today. I am currently a dietetic intern at Kent State University, and I'm working with Executive Director Kathy Powers of Culinary Nutrition Associates. With us today, we have Kathy Powers, as well as Executive Chef Samantha Gasparo. We are so excited for today's webinar to supply you with some tips and techniques for implementing global flavors to help you diversify your menu. Before we begin, let's go over a few housekeeping items. The CEU certificates from the School Nutrition Association will be under the Handout tab. During this webinar, all attendees will be muted until the discussion time. However, if you have any questions or comments throughout the webinar, please feel free to put those in the question bar and they will be addressed there. If you have any technical issues, please access the help screen at the top of your attendee control panel. Additionally, this webinar will be recorded, so if you're unable to stay or would like to view today's content later, this will be emailed to you and posted to healthyschoolrecipes.com. Please allow for a little time for this webinar to be downloaded so that it can be emailed to you. Let's go over the overview for today. We'll begin with a brief introduction, followed by a walk around the world to see what breakfast looks like in various countries. Then Chef Sam will hop on for her first demonstration. Kathy will then come to give you tips and tricks for implementing global flavors. Then Chef Sam will return for another quick and easy recipe demonstration. Kathy will then describe the importance of breakfast and why increasing participation is so important. And Chef Sam will then give her final recipe demonstration for rice porridge. Kathy will return for key takeaways and kitchen application, and we will hold a Q&A. There will be a giveaway at the end of the webinar, so please stay on for your chance to win a knife kit that includes a bench scraper, knife sharpener, and pot holder. Following the webinar, you will be able to identify reasons to increase student participation in school breakfast by diversifying school menus, classify different global flavors based on ingredients included and the regions they originate, and you will be able to evaluate ways to incorporate global flavors into breakfast options. Let's begin with our first poll question. What types of global flavors are you incorporating in your programs? Please select all that apply. Your options today are Asian, Italian, Middle Eastern, and North African. Please select other if one of the options that you'd like to choose are not on the screen. And it looks like we're pretty spread across the board here. A couple are taking the lead. If you haven't had a moment, please reflect on what flavors you're incorporating currently and submit those answers. All right, so it looks like 63% of people utilize Asian flavors, 75% utilize Italian, 25 Middle Eastern, 6 North African, and 19% other. So hopefully today we can provide you with a couple more flavors to utilize within your program. So we are so excited for today's webinar and thought it would be fun to start with a walk around the world at breakfast and see what mornings can look like in different countries. Now, this list is not all-inclusive, and this is just examples of what breakfast may look like, while there might be others that they typically consume. So let's begin with the United States. We see what many would describe as the all-American breakfast, comprised of pancakes, eggs, bacon, and toast. Now, we know that many of us might not have started our mornings like this. We know that we may have once in our life consumed this, and it may be typical for others. We move down into Mexico, we see chilaquiles, which is made up of leftover corn tortillas that are fried, topped with fried eggs, onions, red or green salsa, crema fresca, and queso fresco. In Venezuela, we see arepas, or a bread made from corn that is stuffed with meat and cheese and served along with avocados, black beans, and fresh fruit juice. In Nigeria, we see a spicy porridge that is served alongside a broth and topped with fried cassava root, which is native to this region. And in India, we see idli, or steamed rice pancakes, served alongside different chutneys for dipping, or a spicy porridge. In the Philippines, we can see a garlic fried rice topped with a smoked egg or sliced beef. This would also be served with a warm cup of tea or hot cocoa. In Sweden, we see an open-faced sandwich concept that allows for creativity. This could be topped with a combination of ham, lettuce, tomato, cucumber, or cheese. And finally, we enter the Netherlands. How does starting your morning off with a piece of toast covered in chocolate sprinkles sound? If you said good, you might want to think about taking a trip there. So when we take a step back and we look at how different breakfast is across the country, we can see how many opportunities we have to diversify our menus. Diversifying our menus and incorporating global flavors is more important than ever in school food service programs. Today's students are more diverse, both racially and ethnically, than they have been in the past 20, 10, and even 5 years ago. As students become more diverse, their tastes more sophisticated. Students coming from different cultures may want to see their cuisines represented within their communities. There are, however, different forms of representation these students may be looking to see. For example, students may be looking for authentic meals, which incorporate the same ingredients and techniques that they see within their homes and in their favorite restaurants. Or they may be looking for inspired dishes, which take the same flavors and techniques, but present the meals in a modified way. So let's look at huevos rancheros. This is a traditional dish served in Latin America made up of a corn tortilla, fried egg, and warm salsa. This would be considered an authentic dish, while tofu huevos rancheros, which is found on healthyschoolrecipes.com, is an inspired dish because while it is made with the same techniques and flavors, it utilizes a different ingredient. Substituting the egg for tofu makes it an inspired dish. Kathy will come on later to give you tips for implementing these different kinds of flavors and how you can figure out if your students are looking for authentic or inspired dishes. I'd like to invite Chef Sam up now to present to you the first dish, Korean street toast.
Hello, everyone, and thank you, Peyton, for being here. And so the first dish I'm going to make is a Korean street toast, which is got a lot of great flavor and different than how we normally think about breakfast kind of omelet style and toast together. But I think this is a great combination that you're really going to like and pull on a lot of nice flavors. I love this topic of culturally or globally inspired breakfast options because it's what we're seeing now in the lunch option. So why not incorporate that into breakfast and also find these recipes that really fit into what school nutrition needs breakfast recipes to fit into. We all know that we're, tight on time at breakfast. We don't have a lot of time to make these scratch recipes like we might at lunch, and programs struggle to really incorporate more scratch cooking into breakfasts. We definitely had a lot of problems in the district that I worked at. It was hard to just think of these new and innovative ideas, but I think these recipes are a really great fit for school nutrition programs because some of them can be prepared quickly or the day before. So giving you some options, some great techniques we'll talk about today that can really go beyond the recipes that I'm making here today. So back to the Korean street toast. We're going to be having a vegetable in here too. So we have a cabbage and slaw mix. It's just some mashed carrots and some shredded cabbage and some green onion that we'll place in there for that nice kind of sweet onion bite to this, which is what makes this one of the parts that makes this sandwich so nice. So we're also going to be using some liquid egg, and I'm going to show you a technique kind of making omelet style in a sheet pan. Omelets are not something we think we can make in school nutrition kitchens on large scale and mass production. So this will be a great tip no matter what ingredients you might want to add into your omelet. If it's not a slaw mix and it's a Greek omelet with spinach, tomato, and feta, or it's a Western omelet, or just a ham and cheese omelet. It's really going to give you some options to think about how we're preparing eggs at breakfast. And eggs are one of the most affordable meat alternates that we can have at breakfast, which is why I love to use them. And you're going to see them in a couple of the recipes today, just because they have a high protein. You're giving your students protein. They're great for our students, a great way to start the day, and they're really affordable. So what we're going to do first is make our egg mixture, our egg and vegetable mixture. So I'm going to take my cabbage here, And you want a nice thin cut cabbage and carrot because that is it's going to cook down in the oven just a little bit. It's almost like we're just blanching it in the egg as it cooks in the oven. It'll be slightly, have some kind of chewiness to it, but not very much. It's just going to get a nice little blanch as it cooks in the oven. So you want them nice and thin so that happens. So you want to make sure that you're putting this in a vessel that's large enough to stir so we don't end up with everything all over our workspace. So you want a nice big vessel to stir this all in. And now I'm going to add my liquid egg here. So I just measured this out and I'm going to pour it right over in here. Makes it easy and quick way to make eggs. And now I'm just going to add a little salt and pepper, and that's just going to help bring all these flavors together. And whatever utensil you feel like you want to use, but I'm going to use tongs just because of the shredded cabbage here. Makes it easier to toss it around in the egg mixture. If I was doing a Western omelet with peppers and onions and cheese or anything like that, I might just use a spatula. So just you just want to coat the mixture in the egg. And while it looks like right now, I don't know if there's enough egg for this to really make an omelet. You'll see with the end product that it really does. The egg, rises up and gets nice, and you have the perfect little vegetable omelet here for our Korean street toast. So you can see that's nice and coated. All of the cabbage is coated in the egg. The salt and pepper are dispersed throughout. And now you wouldn't want to do this too far ahead of time because you have salt in here and you have cabbage. So you don't want that to wilt your cabbage down because salt can do that. It can draw the moisture out of vegetables when left for a while. So then this mixture might become a little watery. So if you're going to do this the day before, do not put the salt in. Wait till right before you serve it to stir that salt in. So now I'm going to add my green onions here, scallions. And this is an essential piece to add these into this Korean street toast. So stir that all in, and now I'm gonna prepare my pan. So this can all be made the day before and left, as I said, just leave the salt out and put that in right before you're gonna tray it up for the pan. So now I'm just gonna spray this sheet pan, no parchment or anything. You just wanna get a little spray on there. That's gonna prevent our egg from sticking. And now I'm just going to add this to the sheet pan. Now I want to use a spatula for this part because I don't want no egg left behind in this. We want to use all of it. So you want this to be a full-bodied omelet. You really want that kind of omelet style. You want there to be a nice hearty amount of vegetables in there. It's what's really going to give it. This guy that is not shredded. I'm gonna take that right out. So this is a pre-shredded mix. So you just gotta take out the ones maybe that are not gonna fit. There's no way that's gonna cook anywhere near this stuff. So making sure you're watching your ingredients if you have something that's pre-shredded or you're not shredding in-house. So now you can see we want this nice thin layer. We have, if you find like there's too much egg on one side, you can toss it around. And while this looks like, wow, I don't know if this is really gonna work, this egg will rise up. Eggs are natural leaveners. They had fluff to them, right? They're gonna rise up a little bit. That's why we put them in baked goods. Sometimes if you whip them a lot, that's gonna give whatever you're baking with more body, more leavening. And so now I'm gonna place this right in the oven. And you want to place that in at about 375 for about 20 minutes. You want to watch it. If it starts to brown a little too much, then what you're going to do is you're just going to turn your oven down. You want that to softly cook in the oven. So you can start at 375, but if your ovens run really hot, you can turn it down. You want a soft cook. You don't want that egg to brown too much. You just want a nice gentle heat for that. So the next thing I'm going to make is the sauce for this. So this is a gochujang mayonnaise that's going to go on this. And gochujang is a Korean hot chili pepper paste. It's got some heat to it, a little bit of sweetness to it, and it goes really well. If you don't have this on hand or it's not something you can get, the Korean street taco is also a sauce that you'll find very often with this is just mayonnaise and ketchup. So you can also do that because we know that we often have ketchup in school nutrition kitchens. So I'm gonna add my mayonnaise here, right to my bowl, just so I can whisk this gochujang sauce right in there. And this is the gochujang. It's a thick paste, so you're gonna need to whisk it in there. Or with the spatula if you're doing a small amount like this. Switch to whatever. I'm just kind of dispersing it a little bit. With the spatula, I can push down on it. Just get it distributed. It's got that nice red color, which will happen with the ketchup as well. If you add it, you're going to get this nice light color. So now I'm just going to whisk. Now that I've got most of the big chunks kind of distributed out of there and pressed down with the spatula, I'm going to whisk. You could do this with an immersion blender, really anything that's going to do this whisking motion. And so now you have this nice color to this sauce, and you're ready to go. So you can set that aside. And the last component to this is the toast. And there's a secret in this toast that makes this all worth it. So what we're going to do is add some whole grain bread here, and we're going to toast it right on a sheet pan. I'm just going to do a few slices on this half sheet pan. And what I want to do is just spray it. You can brush toast with butter if you have butter in your kitchen and you use butter in your kitchens. You can definitely brush with butter. It's going to have a lot of flavor. You could also use a spray. You want something on there that's just going to help bring out that nice brown and caramelization of the starch in the bread. So I'm going to flip this over here just to get the other side. And just a quick toast in the oven. Pretty simple. So we're going to add this to the oven. And then I'm going to pull out my lightly toasted bread here. I don't know why that got fuzzy on me, sorry. This lightly toasted bread here. So we have, it's nice. You want it to still be somewhat pliable, and so it's not super hard. So you just want a light toast to it. And then what we're going to do is just sprinkle on some sugar, and that's the key to this, is sprinkling on a little bit of sugar, because it's going to give this added bit of sweetness. Now you don't want too much sugar, it's just a little sprinkle. So now that I'm kind of getting ready to start assembling this here, and you want to take a little bit here and just sprinkle it right on top. So as you can see, I'm getting this little sprinkle. It's just a pinch. It's about just 1/8 of a teaspoon, a very little amount on each piece of bread, because it's just going to add to the sweetness of this bread and kind of bring out those natural sugars. This whole grain bread has a sweet element of sweetness to it, so this is just going to add to it, and it really, this sweet and salty and savory of the cabbage and all these flavors blend together really well. I highly recommend you try it. You know, at first when we making this recipe, you might think, oh, well, it's very different than our breakfast option, but it's delicious, and all these flavors get brought together. So now I'm gonna grab my eggs out of the oven so you can see what this omelet looks like. So here we have this beautiful omelet. You can see, you still see some of the vegetables and the carrots, but that egg has really risen up. So it's really surrounding all of the vegetables. And it just looks delicious. So you could make this. Now you just cut into squares. This is a half sheet pan, so it makes 24 servings. So you would just cut this 4 by 6 and you have your servings. So it's perfect for an omelet. So now I'm going to build this street toast here so you can see exactly what it's going to look like. And it's a great handheld or option for open-faced sandwich. So let me wrestle my gloves on, as all of you know and have been there probably today. And I'm going to build this up right here. So we just want to cut this, and you can see it pops right up. If you kind of can see here, it pops right up off the bottom. So it's nice and clean. So you would measure on here. I'm just going to cut a piece so I can show you. That's going to be 6 by 4 here. So it's the perfect size for your bread. And I'm going to pull this out. So this can be for any omelet. See how well that holds together? I just think this concept for omelets and maybe an omelet bar or different ideas, or if you can do this with egg to make your own egg patties, just with the liquid egg and some salt and pepper. You could also do just cheese and egg for younger students on toast. They would absolutely love that. So just thinking about out of the box ways to serve your students these options. And this can be made the day ahead and just tray it up in the morning and cook it and cut it and you're ready to go. So now we have our toast here. And as I said, it's somewhat pliable, right? You just have a nice brown to it, but you could just serve this open faced. I'm gonna grab a spoon and just place a little bit right on the bottom. It's not much, just a sauce. And now you have this beautiful open-faced sandwich for your students, or they can fold it and have a handheld ready to go. So now we'll have you rate this recipe.
Great, thanks, Sam. Please take a moment to rate this recipe. Now, this is Kathy Powers. I know what some of you are thinking. Really? Cabbage and eggs? It can't work. I was skeptical when we started brainstorming for this program. I was a little bit skeptical, but I tried this at home, and I'll tell you, I had it for 3 days straight, and I can't wait to have it again. It was delicious. So take a moment to tell us how likely you are to use this recipe. Okay, we see the poll is closing and 9% of you said unlikely to use this recipe. 67% said might give it a try. Good for you. 19% said good chance that it'll work, and 5% said definitely would be a hit. Thank you so much for taking a moment to answer that poll. And I can see where you might be hesitant to say that it will be a hit. But Sam, wouldn't you agree that that's a delicious breakfast item?
I absolutely agree. I think this is a great item as breakfast for lunch as well to celebrate any, days that this might be a good fit for. So I think this is it's better than you can imagine it being. I felt the same way, Kathy, as we were developing this. And my husband even said, this needs to be our staple. So.
Great. Well, we'll see you in a few minutes, Chef Sam. Right now, I want to talk about implementing global flavors. So as we think about expanding our menus at lunchtime, as Peyton mentioned, we want to expand them at breakfast as well. Because quite frankly, breakfast can get into a rut. You don't have a lot of time to prepare it. Students want something that's easy to eat and quick and somewhat familiar, but yet we want to keep them coming back and introduce new items. And that's where implementing global flavors comes into play. So when we talk about global flavors, we really are talking about herbs that can add that fresh, bright flavor. We're talking about using a variety of spices. We're talking about acidic ingredients, or as some would say, culinary acids, things like lemon and lime, or vinegars like apple cider vinegar or rice wine vinegar. And then sauces and condiments like the gochujang sauce that Chef Sam used for the Korean street toast. All of these items will make it easy for you to incorporate global flavors in your menu. But we know that herbs and spices in particular don't work solo for most global cuisine. We see that most of the time we're using seasoning blends. A couple examples. Cinnamon, for example, may be a popular spice that's used in a pumpkin pie seasoning blend, but cinnamon is also a common spice that's used in a shawarma seasoning blend. Two very different seasoning blends, but both have the common spice of cinnamon. Another example, one of my favorite spices, cumin. Cumin is one of those spices that we see used across the world. We see it used commonly in a Mexican seasoning blend, as you would use for maybe a taco or a Southwest chili. But we also see cumin used as an important ingredient in the East Asian Indian seasoning blend garam masala. So seasoning blends are an important and easy way for schools to diversify the flavors on your menu. Here's some common global seasoning blends. And those with the star beside them are those that recipes are available for K-12 on the Healthy School Recipes website. For example, in American cuisine, you might have a barbecue seasoning blend. Ethiopian may use a berry. Cajun is found commonly in the southeast of the United States, the French American influence. Asian, very commonly used Asian five spice powder. Italian, of course, isn't just one spice like oregano, but a blend of herbs like oregano, rosemary, marjoram, and garlic. Middle Eastern, you might use za'atar, and in Eastern Asian, Indian, you might use a tandoori blend. So there are seasoning blends that are used all across the world that start with the common herbs and spices. Now, as you think about incorporating global flavors on your menu, you might be wondering where to start. And I would recommend two starting places. First, I would survey your students and the parents. What global flavors are they interested in? And you may have students who have recently immigrated or whose families are immigrants, and you might want to capture some of those familiar flavors of your students from other cultures. But also, I would look out in the community and look to see what flavors and what cuisines are popular in local restaurants and with your community groups. Are there community groups that the folks from various cultures are drawn to, where you might find inspiration for your global flavors? And as always, as you begin to incorporate new flavors into your menu, make sure that you're taste testing with your students. Taste test opportunities in the classroom, on the service line, at a kiosk in the cafeteria. Some of you may have taste tests regularly, such as a Taste Test Tuesday. Or I know many of you also have student advisory groups that you use to taste test your menus. So as you're incorporating new items, don't forget to taste test. These are two of my favorite taste test guides. One is from Vermont Feed, and one is from Action for Healthy Kids. And those will guide you to how you can conduct your own taste test in your own operation. So now we're going to see another globally inspired breakfast item. This is one of my favorite breakfast items. And in fact, as we were testing this recipe, I made up an extra batch of sauce and put it in the freezer so that I can have this for breakfast for dinner on those very busy days. So let's bring Chef Sam back up. and we're going to take a look at the popular shakshuka breakfast item. Hey, Chef Sam.
Hey, Kathy.
I hope that this breakfast was as popular in your house as it was in our house. It's one of my favorite dishes. And I've seen some chatter about shakshuka on tips for school meals that rock Facebook page.
Oh,
So I'm so excited that we have a standardized recipe to offer schools.
yes, I am so excited about that as well. And I love this idea of incorporating more vegetables at breakfast. You'll see that across a variety of cultures, is that vegetables are really found at all meals. And sometimes in our culture in the United States, we have lost those vegetables so at breakfast time. So I think it's great to have more of these vegetables. And I love this dish because it's really simple. These are frozen peppers and onions, so easy, no chopping needed, tomatoes from a can. And this recipe, some diced tomatoes, this recipe was adapted from the chef at my former school district. Chef Ryan is amazing, and he's doing some amazing things. And he developed this recipe for a farm to school competition. So he was using a lot of the local tomatoes. So he roasted his own tomatoes and has a delicious recipe for roasting your own. And then made this shashuka for that dish. So we took it here at Healthy School Recipes and we just adapted it with frozen peppers and onions and canned tomatoes, so it would be more applicable to most in school nutrition and easy to make. And as Kathy mentioned, one of the winning parts of this breakfast is that you can make it ahead and freeze it and then pull it out when you want to serve it. So it's a pretty easy serve in the morning, and you can tray this up the night before and just pop them in the oven, drop the egg on and pop them in the oven for a nice hot savory egg-based breakfast for our students. So what we're going to do first is just start by sauteing up our peppers and onions. So I'm going to get my burner going here. So you could do this in the oven. You could also do this on a stovetop or in a kettle, in a tilt skillet. They're all places. If you're going to do this in the oven, what I recommend is taking your peppers and onions and placing them in a steam table pan, and then tossing them with the oil and all of these spices that I'll go through in a minute. You're going to toss them all together and you put it in the oven, and you're just going to let that cook for a while. It takes longer when you do this process in the oven, but it can be done. Just let it do its thing and come back to it. Then you add your tomatoes, stir it all together, and then put a lid on it and just let it simmer for a little while. So that would be like an hour-and-a-half project in the oven, but you could do it in the tilt skillet, or you could do it in the kettle with the same method I'm doing right now, or on a stovetop if you're serving a small amount and you're lucky enough to have actually open flame stovetops in your kitchen. So I'm gonna add my oil here because this is starting to saute. So just a little bit of oil. Often if you don't actually thaw these peppers and onions overnight, the water in the pepper and onion is enough to get them starting to saute. So that's an option too. So my pan is ready. You know it's ready when it talks to you. That's how you know. So now I'm gonna add this. And so as I said, these peppers and onions were frozen, and I thawed them overnight because it's just, when you thaw things overnight, they're gonna cook faster. If I had to get my peppers cooked down afterwards, I wouldn't need the oil in the pan, but it's going to take a little longer. So what we want is this to really have that nice flavor, and we're just starting to saute this, kind of bring it to a boil, cook a little bit. It's also going to develop flavor once it hits the oven. So this is going to be cooked here to blend the flavors and then really finished in the oven. So this is starting to cook down, and your peppers, just having them thawed is going to decrease that cook time. Really, whenever you're working with frozen vegetables, it's a great idea to thaw them first. If you're adding them to soups, that extra water in the frozen vegetable then goes into your soup. And when you're talking pounds and pounds of frozen vegetables, that's a significant amount of water that's then going to alter your yield size and other things, your yields. And so just being aware of that it's just easier to control the end product if you have thawed frozen vegetables that don't have all that extra water content in there. So now I'm going to add my spices, and this is where it's going to get delicious. This is a North African based dish, so we really have a nice grouping of a few spices here that are going to help bring out the smokiness of this dish. So we have some garlic, granulated garlic, and I always like to use granulated garlic over garlic powder because it just distributes nicer into the dish. Garlic powder and onion powder can be clumpy. So the granulated garlic is just going to give you a nicer, it's going to disperse more nicely into your dish. Now I'm going to have, whoops, thankfully I didn't spill that. I'm going to add some cumin and now some paprika. You could add smoked paprika or regular paprika. If you plan on making this a lot, mix these spices ahead of time and just have them mixed and ready to go. And now I'm going to add just a little bit of salt, and that's just going to bring all the flavors together. That's what salt's job is in food, and when we're scratch cooking, we want to add a little bit because we want that flavor. You know, salt is just going to make everything taste a little better, but it shouldn't taste salty. So we're going to get this cranking. I'm going to turn it up a little more, get that simmering, because what you're going to do, what that's doing now is that you have the oil and the peppers and the spices. So we're going to start to bloom those spices. Spices are dried, so when you add moisture back in, that's when the flavor really starts to develop. So you have to cook a little bit. So let's say you're making a giant pot of chili and you're like, it needs, or a giant, you know, batch of chili, and you're like, it needs more chili powder. You add that chili powder, you have to wait about 5 to 10 minutes and let it cook into the chili before you will be able to understand what flavor you added. Because if you just add it right away and then you taste it, you're not gonna get the full effects of the flavor you added. So it's really important to let these spices bloom, let them rehydrate, let the flavor start to develop in them. So you can understand that component. So whenever you're using dried herbs and spices, give them time in the dish to develop that flavor. They need that. Just like dried fruit, right? When you add water, it plumps back up and you have a different taste, but you have to give it about 15 minutes to do that. Same thing with the spices. In order to develop flavor, you got to give it some time and let it do its thing and love it a little in there. So now we're going to add our tomatoes. These are all cooked, so we're just really developing this flavor. So these are some diced tomatoes. This dish is supposed to be chunky. That's what it's for. So this is something I would definitely say is more of a older, in the 6 through 12 range, maybe even 9 through 12. Great North African dish. But your younger kids, your K through 5, you could do a taste test with them, but in my experience, they often don't like things, many of them, some of them very much do, like lots of colors combining into this one pot or in one world. But I think it's worth a taste test, allowing them to sample, see it, and this is supposed to be served in quantities, in small amounts. So what we're gonna do is actually bake it in these individual containers, which is so fun for kids to be able to grab. This is a great container. This is a 10-ounce right here. You can get them in different sizes and they're oven proof. So you put whatever product in, if you wanna make small pot pies, small quiches, individual buffalo chicken dip, whatever it may be, these are great containers because you put it, you fill them and then you can top it in the oven and bake what you need to bake or melt any cheese you want to melt. So that's a really nice option and they come in different sizes, so you can look for those. It just makes it feel like a more takeout style restaurant when you have these nice containers and thinking about what kind of container you're going to serve it in. So now we're just going to simmer this for a little bit. You just want those flavors to develop, but it will cook down more in the oven. And then we're going to add some feta cheese on top of it, which is so salty and adds that little salty deliciousness to it, but we're minimal amount, right? A little bit of flavor goes a long way with these ingredients. And when you're using, you know, vegetables and these tomatoes, we have no salt added tomatoes here, so we're not worried about the sodium in the canned tomatoes. That you're really using the salt appropriately to develop the flavor. And that's one thing in school nutrition programs that we really need to think about is how to develop this flavor and use these items that have a lot of flavor. They might have higher amounts of sodium, but they have lots of other things that they add to it. I talk about this a lot with oil, right? When you're picking your oil, if you're doing Asian cuisine, grab that sesame oil because it's gonna make such a big difference to the flavor than olive oil or a blended canola oil that doesn't have much flavor to it. So your oil, you know, different ingredients can play a really important part in developing flavor, and we can use those ingredients specifically in scratch cooking to make this delicious meal. So now I have my eggs here, and you need whole eggs for this. So I've cracked them in here, and then I'm just gonna pour them onto the dish. So I'm only gonna make 4 because this is a small batch, but if you were making a lot, you could have a whole container of eggs that you've cracked in. You want them to be whole, and you want them to not be broke. You don't want the yolk to be broken because you'll see it's gonna look really, really nice. So now that this is simmered, I'm just gonna place these in the container here. Bring my tray right over here so you can see this. Oh, I can smell all those spices. You know, paprika is one of my favorites because it's just so delicious. It adds so much smokiness and deliciousness that's a great spice to have in your pantry. We're just doing, adding this vegetable mix here. And then I'm gonna add a sprinkle of my feta right on top here. Move this off to the side. So this is gonna be baked in the oven. So if your hands are washed and clean, you don't have to do this with gloves on because this will be baked in the oven and come to temp. So you just want about 1/4 of an ounce on each one. It's not very much. I've made this a few times, so I'm very familiar with this quantity. It's a good idea to increase kitchen efficiencies to get the quantity, 1/4, you know, use your scoops, use your cups, use your tablespoons to make this. And if you don't have the right size for that, measure out one quantity and then use that as your standard, right? So you're not struggling to weigh every amount or anything like that. You just need to get, if there's no scoop size or no exact amount for that, then you just want to weigh one, have that amount, and then use that as you place it on so you know what you're going for. So you can create that standardization within your own kitchen. So now what I'm gonna do is just take a spoon. I like to do a little bit of a pocket here because this is where my egg's gonna go. And I like the egg, you could sprinkle the feta on top. I like to put it on, underneath the egg because then it like sinks into the egg white, like bakes into it, and it's really nice. So I'm just gonna I'm gonna use my spoon again so I can help my egg, just move it along right in there. And you're just gonna drop the eggs one at a time right in the center there. So it's pretty easy once you get these in a container to just drop them in. But as you can see, this is why I said you don't want the yolk to break because you want them to look like this and you want them to bake nice and bake them up. And I love the way this looks. I love the, you know, the robust red color and the egg yolk. And I just think this is such a delicious dish. So now I'm going to place these in the oven. And like food magic, I'm gonna bring out my completed shashuka. So it's delicious, it's ready to go. Students can grab this. It's nice that tomato has really blended together to make a delicious tomato sauce at the bottom. So we can make this right here. And now we'll have you rate this recipe.
Thanks, Chef Samantha. Please take a moment to rate this recipe, the trendy shakshuka. If you look at the restaurants in your area, you'll probably see this on the menu. Tell us if you're likely to use this recipe. Take a moment to let us know what you think. So the poll is, wow, you guys were fast today. Thank you so much. The poll is wrapping up. And this, we see you're a little bit more hesitant with this breakfast item. 24% of you are unlikely to use this recipe. 60% might give it a try. 9% say good chance that it'll work for your students, and 7% said definitely will be a hit. Great. Thanks for participating with the poll. We'll see you in a few minutes, Chef Sam, with the final recipe. But now I want to talk about the importance of school breakfast. Before we get to that, I'd like to know how many of you have had shakshuka before. You should have a hand raise icon next to your, on the control panel. Can you raise the hand raise icon if you've had shakshuka before. Oh, Chef Jen Brower, I'm so glad to see you on today. She loves shakshuka. That is great. Jennifer is asking what the container is called. And those are just oven bakeable disposable containers. We'll send you the name of the container in the wrap-up email this afternoon. So we have, probably 5 or 6 of you have, 7 have raised your hand that you've had it before. I'll tell you, it is such a delicious and filling dish. I encourage you all to try it. Now I want to talk about the importance of school breakfast. And I feel in some ways like I'm speaking to the choir here. I know that you all know how important school breakfast is. We know that breakfast fuels learning, that kids and teens can concentrate on their schoolwork better when they're not hungry. Studies show time and time again that kids do better in school when they eat breakfast. Not only do they do better when they eat breakfast, but when they have breakfast at school, they do even better. And when they have breakfast in the classroom, the performance is even increased. We know that students who consume breakfast have better nutrition. Studies show that people who eat breakfast have higher intakes of dietary fiber, B vitamins, calcium, iron, and other nutrients. In fact, students who eat breakfast have a greater intake of calcium and fiber in particular. Breakfast increases energy and it improves concentration, leading to better grades and better test scores. And for families, it can actually save time because school breakfast for families can simplify their morning by allowing students to have breakfast at school. Of course, there are negative effects of skipping breakfast. Students who skip breakfast feel tired, irritable, and restless. In fact, students who skip breakfast have more visits to the nurse and have greater disciplinary problems. Skipping breakfast can also increase risk of obesity and other health problems. When we skip breakfast, we often will overeat at other meals due to increased hunger, and often we increase snacking throughout the day to compensate for the skipped breakfast. School breakfast is important. We know that. School breakfast helps establish healthy dietary patterns with students, and it provides fewer saturated fat, sugar, and sodium than students who would eat breakfast at home or on the way to school. School breakfast programs also fight food insecurity. It allows families to stretch their resources and allows students to meet the nutrition requirements they need. One of the reasons we're doing this program, we often get asked to do more breakfast programs, but we know that School Breakfast Week is coming in March, from March 7th through the 11th. And this year's theme is Take Off with School Breakfast. And we thought it would be fun to add the global twist to it. We're going to bring Chef Sam back up now for the next dish, and she's going to talk about a cornmeal porridge. And it's based in Africa. I think she's doing a North African cornmeal porridge. But we see that cereal grains are core to many cuisines. And if we look at Africa, we see that corn is one of the most commonly used grains, followed by millet, teff, sorghum, rice, and a relatively new grain on the American market, fonio. And fonio, they're hoping to become the next quinoa. Sorghum is one of my favorite grains to use and really underutilized, but I'm guessing that it's going to become more popular in the United States. Chef Sam, cornmeal porridge is popular throughout Africa. In Zimbabwe, it's known as zadra, and in Kenya, it is otherwise known as ugali. So it's a popular dish that's used throughout Africa. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Chef Sam, for the cornmeal porridge.
Thanks, Kathy. I love that it has different names in different regions, but the base of it is the same. A lot of times it's how they different, flavor profiles that they make it with. So I think that this is just a great staple, and I love that it's cornmeal, which is a naturally gluten-free product, and it works in school nutrition programs, and so it just gives you a little more flexibility with different allergies and things like that. So I, kind of offering this one meal to everybody, and it's just a different grain option. So instead of oatmeal or with oatmeal on a hot breakfast bar, you could have this cornmeal option just to give students from different cultures that familiar feeling. And really, that's what food is all about, right? Creating that familiar love and the experience that they're having. So to offer these varieties, you're not only exposing other students to a new grain at breakfast, but also giving different kids that experience and taste of a little bit of the taste of their culture from home. So what I have here is just my water. So I'm gonna boil some water, and I'm using coconut milk today, but you can use regular milk for this as well. So I'm gonna add this in here as I start and you're just wanting to warm this up because you need to warm it up before you add it to the cornmeal. And then I'm just gonna add a pinch of salt to this liquid so it dissolves in there. Give it a stir, and you have this nice water and milk base. And we're just heating this up because in order to make the cornmeal dish, what you're gonna have to do is have warm water and then whisk it in. Because otherwise, if you just pour the cornmeal right in here, you're gonna have lots of clumps. So you have to, get that mixture blended into it. So here's our cornmeal here that we're gonna be adding. So I'm just gonna add it to the bottom of my pot so it's nice and ready. And now when this gets warm, it doesn't have to be hot. It can just be warm. So if you were doing this in your school nutrition kitchen, while you might be like 2 pots at once, that's not gonna happen. But what you could do is you could steam this to heat it up. You could put this in a kettle and then take a little bit out, mix it in, and then pour the rest of the cornmeal in. Or you could do it all in the steamer if you have access to a steamer. So you heat this up, and then in another pan, you're gonna have your cornmeal in another steam table pan, and you're just gonna pour some of that mixture in and whisk, whisk, whisk as you're doing it. And then once you get that cornmeal has absorbed a lot of the liquid, you'll see once I do it here, once it absorbs a lot of that liquid, then you can just add it to it. So it's really just that technique of making sure that you're, getting that nice and blended so you don't have any clumps. And now we're gonna add some other things to this delicious dish. And one of my favorite parts about this is that you can really make any flavor you want. So I'm working on a project right now with the local school district where we're standardizing lunch recipes with a woman who is from Africa, and she works in some kitchens here, and she's trying to help us incorporate real authentic African cuisine into schools. And it's been an incredible project. It's so fun. It's been so well received by the community and by the students as well through all these taste tests. I think we've developed maybe 9 recipes so far. And this is one of them that came out of that. So she was teaching me about cornmeal and rice and all these different grains that can be used at breakfast in the flavor profiles. Lemon and blueberry can be put into this. And you could also do, today we're gonna use mango. So once this heats up, and I can tell it's getting warm, I can feel it there, then we'll start adding a little bit to it. But what I want to do here is just add a little, this is nutmeg. So this is one thing I learned in African cuisine, that everything is better with nutmeg in it. So of course that's going in here. And you want to disperse it in here just so it gets nice and evenly divided in here, and it will whisk in better. And then we have a little bit of brown sugar and vanilla that we're going to put in. And this is adding your own sugar to breakfast options, like if you're creating oatmeal bars and not buying a prepackaged instant oatmeal, is really a great idea because you get to control the sugar that you're adding to the breakfast. And a lot of prepackaged breakfasts can be loaded with added sugar. So being aware of that is a really important piece to this. So this is getting nice and hot. What I'm going to do is just add a little bit here. It's just nice and warm. I'm going to turn this back on, and then I'm going to whisk. And I'm just combining this. So it's not, you'll see it kind of blends together, almost like a roux if you've ever made mac and cheese. And now I'm going to add a little bit more. You just can't add it all at once. You got to baby it a little bit. But not much. And then it cooks almost immediately. So you can see this is getting nice and thick. This is what we want it to look like. And you can always add more milk if you feel like this isn't thick enough or it's too thick. Sometimes if this sits for a while, it can get too thick. So now I'm actually going to switch pots for this period. But at this point, if we were doing it in steam table pans, I would add all the liquid and I would just put it right into the pan and then let it roll. Put a lid on it and then put it in the steamer. So here we have our nice pudding, and this is going to cook down a little bit. Okay, so we want to get this nice and cooked here. And at the same time, we're going to add our vanilla right here and a little bit of brown sugar, and that's going to help sweeten this. And also what's going to help sweeten this is some sweetened condensed milk. Now this is also a really popular recipe. This is a really popular recipe in the Caribbean, Jamaican cuisine, to have these corn puddings. And one of the staple in the African porridge as well as Caribbean is the sweetened condensed milk. So once this comes to a boil, I am going to add the sweetened condensed milk. So this is coming to a boil. It's going to take a little minute, but while we're doing this, I'll have you rate the recipe, and then this will be ready to go by the time I come back for the final recipes. So now we'll have you rate this recipe.
Great. Thanks, Chef Sam. Take a moment to rate this recipe. Tell us what you think. How likely are you to use this corn porridge? Again, I love the idea of porridges because they're so universal across the globe. And you can use a variety of grains, whether it's a rice porridge or a corn porridge or a millet porridge. There are endless possibilities and so many different ways to season them. So take a moment and let us know what you think about this globally inspired porridge. So the poll is wrapping up, and we see that 26% of you are unlikely to use this recipe. 50% might give it a try. 14% say good chance that it'll work. And 10% say definitely this will be a hit. Great. Thank you for participating in the poll today. Hey, Chef Sam, do you want me to go ahead and do the key takeaways before you finish that up?
Poll. I'm pretty much done, but as you can see in the time that you did the poll, it got nice and thick. So now I'm just going to add my sweetened condensed milk, and this is going to add a sweetness, and you can do that all to taste. Doesn't change the color, but now you have this delicious base for anything that's going to go on top of it. And I wish you could try this, because this is one of those things where I wasn't sure when I tried it, and it is really delicious, and it's got great base flavor. So, all right, Kathy, I'll send it back to you.
Great. Thanks, Chef Sam. And Jen Brower says that leftover porridge pressed into bread pans and chilled overnight becomes sliced and fried cornmeal for breakfast the next day. And she loves hers with maple syrup. That's a great tip. Thank you, Jen. Let's talk quickly as we're wrapping up about the key takeaways from today. First, school breakfast is important for students' health and education. Incorporating new, diverse flavors can reach new students and increase interest in school breakfast. Global flavor influences can be achieved with various seasoning blends. Porridges are a good base recipe that can be seasoned in various ways. And then finally, my favorite, toast. Toast is served in many forms around the world, and that Korean street toast is just amazing. Let's talk about how you can apply this in your kitchen. How can you identify global flavors that are popular in your community? What seasoning blends can enhance your breakfast and meals? And then finally, how can you make breakfast more interesting in your school? Great. Let's bring Chef Sam back up. Peyton, come back up, and we'll have just a moment for some questions. So go ahead and bring Peyton back up, and we'll bring Chef Sam back up. Hi, Peyton. Peyton, I want to say, as we're wrapping up today, I want to say thank you so much. You did a great job kicking us off today, and you've really been the driver behind this really interesting and exciting webinar for us. Great job, Peyton.
Thank you so much. It was really out of my comfort zone, but it was a great opportunity. So thank you for having me today.
I love working with dietetic interns, and you've really been helping us a lot behind the scenes. I also want to share that Peyton has written a companion blog to Global Breakfast that will be coming out soon, and she's doing a recipe collection for our next newsletter on Global Breakfast. So there's lots to come from Peyton. Chef Sam, what do you have here?
All right, so these are just the final dishes, which some of you have seen. We have the porridge. You could do any. This is mango and blueberries. You could do mango and pineapple. I always like a little coconut sprinkled on things if your school allows it. Here is the shashuka, delicious. You can serve it with flatbread or even a piece of toast. And then here's a great option for your Korean street toast on the go. Let them fold it up and be able to just eat it handheld with the sauce on the side. So great breakfast items inspired globally.
Great. We did have a question, Sam, and you partially answered it. Donna was wondering what kind of toppings would you put on the porridge?
Pretty much whatever you could imagine. I think cinnamon and apples, you know, some roasted apples would be delicious, or roasted pears, mango, blueberries, and a little lemon juice goes really, really nice with these. Great way to use frozen blueberries. Just steam them up to make it a nice hot sauce, and you'll just, you know, nice and warm to go with the porridge. Strawberries would be delicious. Really anything you have could be a delicious option.
Great. I don't see any other questions. Let's launch our third poll. The third poll is, what tips and techniques from today's webinar are you likely to use? So please take a moment to answer the questions on the third poll. Are you likely to incorporate global spice blends at breakfast? Survey parents and students? Hold taste test events? Oh, do the sheet tray eggs for an easy omelet? Or try to incorporate an authentic dish like the shakshuka? So Peyton, I'm going to ask you to, once the poll closed, for you to read out the results from the poll and close us out of the webinar.
All right, it looks like almost everyone is in, and looks like 30% of people would incorporate global spice blends, with 27 that would survey, 45% said they would hold taste testing events, and 68% said they would try the sheet tray omelets. So that looks like the winner there. And then 25% would incorporate the authentic dish shakshuka. So thank you so much for entering or filling out the poll today. And it looks like we have the winner for our giveaway as well. That is Renee Elliott from Fayetteville Schools in Tennessee. So yay, Renee.
So Peyton, I just want to share what the giveaway is. We have our deluxe chef's knife. It retails for $75 with a knife guard. We have the bench scraper, a healthy school recipes hot pad, and then the portable knife sharpener. So that's our knife kit giveaway.
All right, congratulations, Renee. And thank you so much, everyone, for attending. This was a really exciting opportunity that I had to do with Kathy and Sam. So have a great day.
Thanks so much, Peyton. I want to remind everybody to complete the evaluation on the way out. Your attendance certificate will be mailed this afternoon. And our next webinar is March 23rd, and that is Plant Forward with Pulses. So we'll see everybody then. Thanks so much, Peyton. Thanks, Chef Sam. Bye-bye.